Hi everyone. So, all right, let's do some more airbrush practice or airbrush stuff because the last video was actually kind of successful. So, one thing I can say is if you want to practice doing airbrush stuff, I would say I wouldn't say photo reference. Get reference that is stylized. And by stylized, I mean something which is closer in style to, like, figure out what you want to do with your art. How do you want your work to look? Find something that is close to the way you want it to look and emulate that. Don't just take photo reference just because it's photo reference. Don't just take reference just because it's there. Find what you want to paint or stuff that is close to what you like to paint and practice painting like that, because people want to talk about, like, people want to know how to develop their styles. Well, your style is what you like, so paint what you like, and it doesn't have to be some kind of boring reference. So in my case, I'm pulling up things like this is somebody's 3D rendering, and I'm emulating that. So first thing I'm going to do, as you can see, I've already done two lenses. I've done that one, I've done that one, this one here. And yeah, I'll just do another one just to show you the process. So the first thing you need is the shape. So I'm going to maybe construct it over here. I'm going to emulate this. So it doesn't have to be 100% exactly like it, but I'm just something that's close. What I've drawn is a little bit larger, but it's fine. So I'm going to lock the transparency on that layer. And the first thing I want to do is, well, this whole thing is actually a little too dark. So I'm going to bring it up. Maybe something more like that. So yeah, get your first base tone. Maybe something like that. Right. See, the cool thing about this is the moment I do this, it feels like we're looking through some kind of frosted glass marble. And then let's use the color burn. I now have three types of fall off. I've got one which is the sharp needle fall off. I've got the one that's the big soft round one, which I just used. And then I also have one that's something in between. So it gives me a little bit more room. So yeah, I could just use the burn tool on this. So the burn tool, make that brush really big. And then I can tune this. So the burn color mode is, it both deepens existing color and it darkens it. So it darkens and deepens at the same time. And then I'm going to tune this. Maybe I need to make that brush stroke a little smaller. Yeah, so the thing is I use a giant brush, so I need to use a smaller brush to get a sharper, really tune that down. Seeing a bit more of a purplish look over here. Okay. And then let's see. Let's look at this, right? We got that bright. I'm going to use color dodge. The most important thing that you get is not just what color, but it's also the shape. So you'll see that I do the shape first, try to get that shape as close as I can, and then I start using the color palette to tune the existing brush stroke. It undoes and redoes the stroke with the new color. So that's closer. Oops. Sorry, I got the autosave. maybe make it more green. Get that subtle hue change in there. All right, now we've got some other stuff going on. These dark pits. Again, that looks like something to use a color burn on. That looks pretty good. And then I'm gonna right click and use the color drawing function to get rid of the bits I don't need. Let's undo that. Let's try it once more. That's more like it. And then I guess in this case, I'll use the cutting tool. Let's get a merged copy of that. Let's get that state, and then we'll just paint this back in. So it's kind of like that. Then I'll get this tool here. Let's undo that, grab that state, and then paint this edge back so you can see I can get that softer edge. Bring that back a bit. More like it. And I'm not trying to get a 100, like a 1-to-1 copy. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get this thing here has to look correct. That's what matters. This is just the reference. And so you study from this, but you don't, it does, you're not, there's a difference between imitation and emulation. Okay. Parrots imitate, like a parrot, like the bird that the parrot does not understand what you tell it. It only repeats things exactly as you tell it. And it can only repeat, it can't change the meaning. It doesn't know the meaning of the words that you tell it. A parrot just duplicates. That's all it can do, and it can only do it in that one context. It can't really use it. It doesn't emulate. Like the word emulate, I think a good example of it is a video game emulation system, right? A video game emulation, like a Nintendo emulator or a Game Boy emulator. What does it do? It replicates the environment of the software so that when you get the ROM out of the cartridge and you plug it in there, the thing can't tell the difference. It emulates the whole internal environment of the console. That's what an emulator does. So in this case, if you want to learn emulation, you got to understand what's going on. Why do those colors exist? Why does it change color like that? And there, I'm going to give you a really quick, I actually happen to have a little bit of stuff up right now. Here, let me just copy this image. I'll show you a bunch of pictures to explain. Here's what happens. When you shoot a ray of light through a hunk of glass, this is a optically dense medium. I just want to make sure that this camera is in fact broadcasting what I want. Okay, good, yes. So we shoot a ray of light through there, white light, and then it goes through this optically dense medium of glass. Light slows down. It travels slower through glass than it travels through air or vacuum. But the thing about white light is it consists of multiple wavelengths of light. It's a blend of separate wavelengths of light, or a spectrum. Now, these wavelengths, you've got your longer wavelengths, which are closer to the red and the infrared. You've got the stuff that's in between, which is your yellows and your greens. And then as the wavelengths get shorter and shorter, you start going into blue, violet, and ultraviolet, which is over here. So one thing you can probably tell is that the shorter wavelengths, the blue and the ultraviolets, bend a whole lot more readily than the red stuff does. So it's almost like if you can imagine a car, if we're driving a car along and the car suddenly hits this, like the right side of the car hits this hunk of the glass, except let's say it's not glass. Let's say it's like honey or syrup. So when the right side of the car hits the honey and syrup, it begins to slow down, but the left side is still got good traction and it's moving really fast. So what happens is the car begins to turn to the right. And then when all of the wheels are in the syrup, it travels straight again. And then in this case, when the car when the car exits, well, the left wheels exit first. They gain traction first and they start to speed up. So it causes the car to pull to the right some more. And so that is why the light is bending. But the shorter the wavelength, the more readily it bends. And because you've got a whole spectrum of light, a whole blend of all these lights, you'll see that the blue stuff bends a lot more and it separates and it winds up down here, whereas the red stuff doesn't bend as much and winds up out here. So you get this color separation occurring. Now, the more you bend the light, the more color separation you get. This is why it requires this prism, right? The prism is a special shape that's designed to really help that separation. So we take, let me just get another image up. All right, so we look at this one. All right, this is probably a CGI rendering or it's real. CG renders are emulations. They're simulations. They emulate all the light environment. And so, well, there's light that's back there that is passing through all of this bent glass, which is bending the light, and it's causing it to separate and turn into a rainbow. But when we look at the glass, we are staring at a section of the rainbow in different parts, and so we will see these weird and funky colors, these rainbows appearing because the light is splitting, and so the parts that hit our eyes, you know, they're separating, so we'll see those different colors. Anytime you're looking through glass which is bending the light, you will see color separation. Let me bring up another image. Right? And so it separates and you see the rainbow with the funky colors. So even if you've got white light and clear glass, you're still going to get this separation occurring. And so don't just draw white light, clear glass, and have no colors whatsoever. There is some separation that occurs. It's not a whole lot of separation sometimes, but in this case, this is an exaggeration of it. This is an exaggeration of that effect. And there's a reason why do they use diamonds in jewelry? Well, the thing about diamonds is diamonds have much greater optical density. They're way better at bending the light. More light bending means more rainbows. You get to see more funky colors out of a diamond. Also, it's also easier to bend the light and cause total internal reflection to make the diamond sparkle. So it has these optical properties due to that. So this is why the reason I tell you this is that you can emulate this in your mind. You understand what's happening to the light. Why do these funky colors exist? So we see there's another thing, caustics, right? Look at how this light is being focused into different areas, right? So the light is bending and it's getting concentrated in some areas and it's being depleted from other areas because it's been redirected. So you get these caustics occurring. And when you look at the glass, you'll see areas where the light has been concentrated. It's been scrunched and compressed into an area and has become greatly intensified. And this is why you need a pin fall off airbrush. If you don't have one, you can't emulate those caustics. This is really, what's really difficult about this is that I have to start with a large brush that's out here. And then it has to be a narrow brush, but I have to increase the pressure. And then I need to decrease the pressure and wind up with the wide brush out there. So maybe what I'll do is I'll use the pin fall off brush in here. And this whole thing is actually gone completely white. So this is the problem, right? We've got this large white section. Is that? Yeah, you can see it's we look at the RGB values, that's 248, 249. Remember what happens when you hit white? It becomes flat and you can no longer enact a change. That's an issue. That's a real problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this thing in a maybe multiply mode and knock this whole thing down a bit, right? We just brought it down by one whole tier. So now it's 215, 218, 219. I've got room to play again. But this whole area has flattened. But that's okay. I'm going to fix that. So what's really difficult to do is you can make brush strokes which go from really, really light to highly intense. But the opposite is extremely difficult to do because it just doesn't, it's hard to fade out. You can't fade a stroke. You need to increase and come from the other side and increase like that. But there's also problems with that. Whereas if I increase like this and I increase like that, you get this overlap, right? When brush strokes sit beside each other, they overlap like that. So that's why on TV Paint, you have a drying function that you can turn off, and it prevents the weird overlap, at least until the next undo or tool change. So in this case, using this sort of tool, I would have to do something like this. I have to do that because I want it to get denser in the middle, but smaller at the same time. I'm using the foot pedal to do this kind of stroke. So we put the thing into add mode. And so now we have that hard core, except it went too far, like it starts too far out. Maybe I'll make it out of 2 smaller brush strokes. Like then I'll go to a medium. So there's my in-between brush. And then the large one. And maybe I'll dim that down substantially. And so there's some problems with consistency. You can see this blobbing occurring because of the overlap. So that's not acceptable. So maybe I'll try it with this one instead. Right? It's not easy to get that particular look. If you're trying to get this particular shape and you just want it to, right? It's like it's something simple, but the thing about airbrushes is you want to get it in as few brush strokes as possible. And I think maybe the trick to this is to use a really, really soft, like pinkish brush. We got that pinkishness occurring. And then just try and get this in as few brush strokes as possible, right? Maybe that's more like it. So the purpose of doing these sorts of studies is it makes you really appreciate the use, like it makes you appreciate every single brush stroke. You're not sitting there licking away, like, because you're trying to get an effect. You're trying to get an effect with like 1 brush stroke or 2 brush strokes. I see this purple bluing that's occurring, and then so. What also kind of doesn't help is the fact that I'm the Cintiq, the first world problems here. The Cintiq I've got, it has difficulty showing saturation. So I have another monitor, and I look on the other monitor to make sure I'm not going too crazy with the colors and the saturation. I see this little area over here. So let's see. I think I need to deepen the color, so I'll use burn mode for that. Okay, so the only problem is that I shouldn't be using a needle fall off. I'll maybe use something, I'll use my 50/50 fall off instead. Yeah, that's better. I had to tune the opacities on these fall off brushes earlier today. I started realizing that the opacities were actually way too high and making it extremely hard for me to govern the opacities of my brush strokes. And I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, actually, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it. Because like I said, you pretty much have an idea of my process as it is. The thing is, I just keep doing this process over and over again until the whole thing's done. Right? So I'm not gonna. Let's talk about what's interesting and relevant. So if I click these, if you look at the power on these, right, this big guy is set to like 38. This one's set to 38. This one's set to 40. And this one's set to 100. My pin fall off's at 100 on the power. So let me just get a pure white canvas out here and explain what's going on. So if I take the big one and I paint a brush stroke, actually here, I can disable the pressure sensing by clicking a button. Now it just does a 100% brush stroke. So it disables the pressure on these. All right. And then there's my needle fall off. Funny, the needle fall off actually looks pretty much identical to my mid-range fall off. Yeah, that is an issue. I want my mid-range fall off. Like this is the thing, is I want my tools to. On the other hand, you know what it is? It's that if I take the needle fall off and I disable the pressure sensing, that's how the needle fall off looks. If I put my pressure sensing back on, now you can see there's the difference, right? If I put them at 100%, then you can't tell the difference. But if I hover my mouse over the center of this one, you can see that the RGB values are 000. Oh, wait. They are 000 because there's no alpha back here. Hold on. I need to fill this whole background with white. Okay, now we'll actually see RGB values going on. So there's one. Here's the other. Here's the other. It's kind of funny. They don't look very different unless you're using pressure. So, okay. And then I need to merge my paper layer. I need to merge this layer with the white background. Okay, now you can see the RGB values of this. This is 111 in the middle here. And as I move over, it starts to climb up to, 255. This one here, we look at the core of that, that's like 19. So it's not a pure black. This one does actually go all the way to 0. Right. Now, the reason why I went through and I adjusted the powers of all of these was because I wanted to make sure that, they would go to black, but not have, like, they wouldn't be excessive. Like, if I were to crank this up to 100, so this one's at 100. If I crank this one up at 100, then you'll see that if you look at at these numbers here, right, at the RGB values, those hit 0 here. I'm not even at the core yet. Right, so all that here, this is all flattened out. If I use the power of 100, that's way too strong. So what I can do is I can dial that back and redo the brush stroke. Let's try that again. No, let's see, we got to 0 is here. We're very close to the core. If I dial it back to 50 and redo the stroke. Right now it's at about 4 in the center. So this is the thing, is that you can bring back that power, and you can see there's a lot more shape nuance. Like there's a lot more, it's a much more nuanced shape. Maybe 55. Let's undo and redo that again. That went all the way to 1, right? So, which is what I have now, right? Is I got the thing down to 1. Same thing with this one. Right, the problem gets even worse, that if I bring this power to like 100, right, it's like, look how it looks. It doesn't have any subtlety. It goes from 55 to 55 and then hits 0, like right out here. Flat. This is all flat. I can't use this for shading. This is no good for shading if it caps out like that. So that's why I have adjusted the powers. You know, I've dialed back the power on this thing so that when I paint, you'll see this thing now it goes right. Oh, if I use this preset at the power of 38, right, we get lots more shape nuance. It goes all the way to 1 now out here, and you can see that we keep all that shape. Right, so now I can actually use this thing for shading. You don't want it to completely cap out that quickly. Now there's different ways in which you can achieve opacity. Another way to achieve lesser opacity is instead of adjusting power, you adjust the step. And so if I put the power at 100% and I increase the step, right? So if I really increase the step, you'll see that it actually has gapping. And that's another thing I don't like. I don't like the gapping. I don't like to see that gapping. It looks ugly. And on top of that, when you paint, right, it's going to wait before it makes another stamp, and then it waits before it makes another stamp. And it's like there's these big gaps between stamps. So it feels kind of inconsistent in how it applies the stamping. I want it to rapidly stamp instead, so I can really, you know, smoothly grow that shade. Right, so this gives me much more, a lot more control over the shade now. And then same thing with this one, right? Is I can. Oh, is this? Okay, yes. Right, I can really control because I've got that very small step. It's a step of only 3, the low step value. So you don't want to have high step values, otherwise it starts to really, you get a lot of gapping, and it just doesn't look good. It doesn't, like the thing about airbrush is supposed to look slick as shit off a shiny shovel. It's supposed to be smooth, and if you've got a huge step, forget it. It just won't look good. So we've got a lot of, what do we got here, right? We got like this. This is a very bright area, kind of becoming yellow, becoming red, orange. We have another caustic stripe here, and then it's becoming purple. It's almost looking bruised in there. You got all these little things, and I can almost sense like there's a bit of green and blue, teal, right? This is going from teal to blue. This is going yellow. This is kind of more red over here. Right? You have to start to sense. There's like these very subtle rainbow transitions, and you have to be able to kind of like sense those. Right? If we look at this, we can see that there's a big circle here, a large ellipse forming here. There's another large ellipse here. There's this little tail that's poking in here, and you got to look for all these shapes. There's another, like a pinch going here. There's this sharp pinch. We look. There's the edge. And this edge has this kind of there's a red flare coming off of that edge over here. You've got that white and a yellow. So you got to look for all these color subtleties. Here it's all very cyan and teal, becoming closer to blue, purple, reddish in here. And you've got to know, okay, well, how am I going to make this big, right? How am I going to get this area here to lighten up the same way this thing did? So all of this is just an exercise, is that when you look at that, you got to figure out, okay, well, how will I manipulate my tools? What drawing mode do I have to use? What size of brush do I have to use? Maybe instead of using dodge, I'll use lighten only mode instead. And I can get that in there. And then maybe I'll use this thing, and then I will use dodge, and I'll reinstate the edge. And then because it went too bright, right, I'll tune it to bring it down. Then we've got that bright edge there, looking kind of pinkish. And it looks bright here, and then it kind of pinches down, right? So you can see that. it becomes more intense over here, so. Really trying to pinch that down, and it tangentializes with the edge, right? Like it goes all the way up to the edge and it forms a nice tangent. It's tangential. And then I'm going to tune it. We're going to get a bit of that pink in there. Then I'll replay the same brush stroke. I'll maybe even size the brush smaller. There, so now I affect a smaller core. Amazing what you can do if you, and it's also a different hue. Maybe I'll put it into additive mode and replay the brush stroke again. So with that same brush stroke, I just replay it and then I tune it. And then maybe I adjust the size of this brush, make it smaller, undo, redo. Now let's go for the bigger brush. Okay, so I like the core that it's forming here, but it's still too strong out there. So what I do is I get the big brush like this, I undo a bunch of stages, grab the state, redo those stages, and then I softly paint away the bits I don't need. All right, I take that prior state and I use it to erase. So I'm tuning that. So if it's good in one area but not good in another, you know, you can still make use of it. You don't have to use the whole brush stroke. You can just use the part that works. And then we can see that there's a red flare coming up here. And the other thing about this red flare is it's occurring in a very, very dark region. And one thing about the color dodge tool is that dodge doesn't work well in a black zone. There's nothing to bring up. So if there's nothing to bring up, then you got to use additive mode instead of dodge. And we can see here, like this, using additive mode always works. Like it always brightens things up. Now, if I undid that, if I look here, right, like, let's see. Well, I mean, we can maybe, because like if I look at the RGB values, there is a little bit of color there. It's not 000 exactly. So let's see what. Like there's some things that I like about using dodge, and that it acts in an exponential way. Oh, okay, good. They're not coming for me. Okay, but in this case, right here, I'm trying to put that purple stripe in here, but you can see that the color dodge did jack all in that area, but it blew up here. So that's not the right painting mode. So I'll undo that. I'll use a lighten only instead. Ah, right, lighten only that got us some better results. Right, so there's a lot. This is making every single brush stroke count. It means when you add a brush stroke, you don't just say, okay, on to the next brush. It's like, no, did that brush stroke make it any better or worse? And if it made it worse, in what way was it worse? Can we tune it? Can we adjust it? Should we tweak the color? Maybe the transition was the wrong way, like it faded in the wrong way. Maybe it was misshapen. And if it's misshapen, you undo it. Right, like we're on computers, right? We undo the damn thing, or maybe part of it was good, the other part of it was bad. So you use a history state to paint out the part that didn't help, that's not helping. That's the thing, is that you got to make every single brush stroke count, because it's like you're building. It's an illusion built on a house of cards. If you got a bad card in there, a card's like poorly aligned, the whole thing comes crashing down. Right, and you're going to be building each brush stroke off of the structure laid down by the other brush strokes. So if there's something in there that's not helping the whole thing, you know, take it out. Take it out before it breaks the illusion. So let's see, we got a lighten only mode here. I'm going to put this thing back into, let's try additive. Additive has its own little issues in that you see additive brightens up even the bright stuff as well. And to get that little funky stuff going on there, you know, maybe I'm better off using lighten instead. But sometimes lighten won't do anything because the color I chose wasn't light enough, so I need to bring that up. Ah, now we get that green. Good. Good, the green's in. And there's this kind of a weird rectangle going on. The hell I know what's going on with that, but we are in lighten mode, so I'm gonna bring that in there. And then again, right, I'm gonna tune every single brush stroke. You've got to tune it. And it's kind of feels like it's got a blue tinge to it. So you gotta be highly aware of these tinges, these tints and tinges. And it's covering this huge area, this huge section. So I need a much larger brush to be able to cover that area. And then I'm gonna undo this bit here. I'm gonna reshape that. That's all right. Then I can bring up this this blunt fall off. We can tint that. Again, putting in the yellow. We'll tint this as well. Now, if you don't have this color palette, and I guarantee you probably don't, and you don't have TV Paint, so that means you probably can't even access the plugin for it. It's called P-Palette. Then every time you want to tint it, you're just going to have to undo the brush stroke, choose a different color, and then repaint it in. Enjoy. Thankfully, TV Paint has the ability to replay brush strokes. I feel like that guy from The Fifth Element, right, where they had that gun. You shoot the target once, and then when you hit the replay button, all the bullets hit the same spot, right? It's the replay button. This thing has a replay button, and as you can see, I abuse the living daylights out of it. It's such a useful function. Okay, we're still in lighten only mode right now, and I'm just using this to maybe what I'll do is I'll capture this whole area here. Oops. Right. I captured that whole area. Then I grab myself a fall off brush, undo it. Let's set the state. And then we can softly paint it back in. Better, much better. Much better. We have this big ovoid shape here. It looks a little darker here. It looks kind of like nothing's changing here, right? How do you do that? What do you do? Oh no, right? So if I draw that big ovoid shape in there, it's funny. I still have. I just used the merge state, so it works. That's one way to do it. If you have the merge state, that'll work. Another way of doing that is we set this thing into burn mode, and we just throw it in like. And then I'll tune it. So yeah, that looks awful, right? Because it's kind of just bluntly thrown everywhere. Looks awful. So what do we do about this? Same deal. You undo it. Right? You undo it. You grab the state. Then you redo it. And then you start painting out the areas that don't work. I can see there's a big shape there, and I can just boom, gone. But then the thing is, I like this fading in here. So I'm going to use my airbrush, undo that, grab that state, and then paint it back in. And then I like how it's kind of gone from this area here. So I can undo that, grab that state, and then redo it, and then paint that. You see, like this is the way it works, right? This is why I just say, like, just keep using the same techniques over and over and over again. It's not like, what was that Bruce Lee phrase, right? Bruce Lee is not, he says, I don't fear the man who knows, you know, I don't fear the man who knows 10,000 punches. Right? It's like, I fear the man who's practiced one punch 10,000 times, right? That's the thing. So it's not about having a lot of different skills. It's about having a limited handful of skills that you have just really honed. You really hone like the few skills. You got to be like Saitama, like One Punch Man. We got that little funky flare. It feels all pinkish. There we are. Oh yeah, now we're really getting that pinky going on. Extremely technical terms. Pinky. I mean, at this point, it already looks pretty good, right? And you could stop at any time, really. Like this is the key to being able to paint these illusions, is to make it so that the illusion works, even if you haven't thrown in a ton of detail. Like right from the beginning, when we had the what was it, when I had first cut my shape, and then I made the first few like airbrush, it already started to look good, right? So this is the thing, is that if your painting doesn't already, you know, if you're still struggling even at the beginning, then it means you're off to a bad start. And I don't care how many hours you spend afterwards, you're just not going to save it. It's going to be, it's just going to be an uphill battle the whole time. So it's better to just start over. And we have like that's in here. It's like it's really exploding with light from underneath. It's really, I know. Bob Ross has his happy little tree thing. I've got my mouth explosion sounds. And then we've got this reflection going on here. So grab that big old shape. I'm going to put this thing in additive mode instead of dodge mode. I find for reflections, I prefer to use add instead of dodge. So something like that. But it feels something about it feels very bluey. Oops, do that. I think I went a little too far on that. More like it. Okay, but you see it fades, right? It fades up here. So what do? Once again, good old grab the state, undo, and just paint in the bits that work. Make that brush bigger. That's how you get that that reflection back in. Now we got this dark pit here. Dark purple pit. Dark purple pit. So we use a bit of burn. Right, just this is just like if you use the right tool and the right brush, it will you'll feel the improvement. It'll just feel like, wow, yeah, whoosh. It really like. And then, you know, sometimes it will be a struggle, and if it's a struggle, it's like, it feels kind of bluish and not very purplish. Right, so I'm adjusting this. It's like, it's not purpling. You know, still feels really blue. So maybe let's try multiply mode. Does multiply mode get us any joy? Not really. I think what I got to do is we are darkening down, but there's also some lightening occurring. So let's try a little bit of light in there as well. Okay, that does help, but I feel like this whole area here needs to be plunged into a little bit more. We gotta burn it a little bit more. Let's try multiply again. And sometimes there's also colorize, right? Colorize is, oh yeah. See, colorize is able to just wrap, like with colorize mode, like you can just go in there and forcefully make it purple, right? And you're leaving all the values alone for the most part. For the most part, it's not 100%, but sometimes it's like you don't need it to be brighter or darker. Sometimes the hue is just incorrect, and so you may just have to go in there and forcefully crank the hue around. Okay, so got a bit of a dim that way down. We can still see that hard shape. So once again, undo, grab the state, redo, and then just erase the bits that don't work. Much better. Get rid of some of that edging. Yeah, much better. Okay, let's try and, you know, I really want to burn in that hard shape right there on the side. That's good. And then I want to get that bright caustic in there. Not quite. That's better. Yeah, so the problem that we're facing now is, again, if you're using dodge in a dark zone, it doesn't work very well. So if you want consistent effect, then you got to use add mode. Yeah. That's better. All right, so first get the brush stroke in there. And yeah, it's going to overlap over things that you don't want it to overlap on, but that's okay. Just let it overlap. Tune your color until you're satisfied that you're getting the ooh, that looks really nice. Yeah, bingo, there we are. That's the shape we wanted. And maybe I don't have to like slice it off or anything. I'll just leave it like that. Put this thing back into a burn mode. Let's burn this yellow back into it. I see what's going on. Well, we can see that there's a bit of a light edge here and then it gets dark. So first I got to put this thing in. And I think I need a much larger, yeah, I needed a larger brush. Okay, so we got the right color now. but the shape is incorrect. It's okay. So once again, if you want to reshape that, we grab this. Well, actually, I'm going to undo, grab that state, and then paint out the areas where it's not working. All right, so there's two ways in which you can go about it. You can work on it in an additive fashion or a subtractive fashion. And then we've got that bright area. So I'm just going to grab this color right here. And I'm just going to put it into light and only mode and should just be able to paint it right in. No, it doesn't. It's not really working out well. Maybe put this in additive mode and see how that goes. Okay, so the value change is good, but the hue is not changing the way we want it to. So if you only need to adjust the hue, but the values are okay, then you can just use the colorize tool and force it around. Just grab it and make it do what you want it to do. You could also just use color mode as well, and you could just paint it in with no blending at all. This is what tuning is for, right? Yeah, the only reason I don't like to use... Oh boy, we're gonna have a bit of a... The reason why I prefer using blending modes is because it maintains all the transitions in there. Right? It preserves transitions and it keeps things complex. Whereas if you use no blending modes and you're just using color mode, well, which I guess in itself is a blending mode, it's the anti-blending mode. What it does is it tends to flatten things because it makes things all uniform, that same color when you use regular, like normal mode. But I mean, like if no one ever saw this one, right? If they just saw this thing by itself, would they really know? That's why I don't say, you don't have to copy it like perfectly, but look at this thing and try and learn as much as you can from it. I like how much brighter this is. Mine's a little dull. I kind of want to punch this thing up a bit more. Give it a little domestic abuse. There we go. Punch it up. Yeah, much better. I also want to sharpen some of these up too. That's better. I mean, this little red stripe isn't present over there, but it still looks good. That's the thing, right? It's like if it looks good, that's all that matters. I'm just gonna leave it in there. Screw it. But yeah, that's, again, I hope this, people get an idea. They understand that every brushstroke has to be purposeful. And if you're going to do studies, study something that is interesting to you, visually interesting to you. Figure out what style you want and Google images. It's a giant smorgasbord. It's tons of reference out there, and you can use it to learn. You can really learn like a ton from it. There's really no excuse. To not be able to, like there's no excuse to not get good at this. Like it's easier to learn than ever before now. And You don't necessarily have to find a great artist. You can just, you've got, there's so much, right? And just, this is CGI rendering. This is beautiful stuff. So, that's what I would say. It's just the best way I think, to learn to, what you want to do is you don't want to just learn how to paint. You want to learn how to paint. Like, you want to figure out how do you want your imagery to look. That's what's really important.